Well, first of all, thank you, President Christian. Thank you for everyone, Lisa and others that put on this event. I want to thank you especially for getting the string just right so it covers up what I spilled this morning at breakfast. I am normally, when I speak with and to an audience in front of a piano, this is very different for me. I rarely do it, therefore I don't even know mic placement. So if I start to do this and talk to you like that, that's why. And I'm going to speak for a while, and then I'm hoping there's time for questions, because I really do like talking with people more than at people. But we'll start with the ideas I have in my head, and then we'll go with the ideas you have in yours, I hope. And I want to start with saying that I am really here fundamentally because of what my dad accomplished. Now, my friends won't let me get that sentence out of my mouth. Oh, no, it's what you've done, and it's your ideas, and it's your decisions, and all those things are true, but the substrate, the underneath it all, is the fact that my dad became who he became. And my dad knows he's lucky. My dad knows that he won what he would call the ovarian lottery. And the ovarian lottery is a thought experiment. And the thought experiment goes like this, is that just before you're born, you have no idea what you're going to be born into, what gender, what country, what health condition. You don't know anything about the potential of your birth, but you have the ability to design a system that will give you agency and possibility and a fulfilling life regardless. It's a pretty interesting question, right? My dad knows that he was born in 1930 in a market system that rewarded his particular brain wiring, but more importantly, he was white and he was male. And he was born in the US, but all of those things contributed greatly, completely, to what he was able to accomplish. So we're all in this room because we are benefiting in some way or another from a culture that has allowed us to sit in the seats we're in. I'm essentially going to finish where Angela left off. And we did not compare notes, but it's just this. So I appreciate that is where you left us, because that is where I'm going to start. You know, the founding fathers essentially got to play out the ovarian lottery thought experiment. But they were already born. But they found themselves in a situation where they could write the rules, and we are all benefiting from those rules. And yet, in hindsight, they were revolutionary at the time, certainly, but in hindsight, they were deeply flawed. And one thing I want to remind everyone of, I just looked this up yesterday, that Alexander Hamilton was 21, Thomas Jefferson was 33, over a dozen of the founding fathers were 35 or under. These are young people with an opportunity to create a world that they, at the time, felt was something that could be done better, given the frame they'd come from, and better for more people. However, in that aspirational document, the Declaration of Independence, that says all men are created equal, men, that's one thing to say, but when it came to put it into a legal document, the Constitution, it said actually some men are 3/5, some cultures don't count at all, being Native people, and of course women aren't anywhere to be seen. So we are living inside a fundamentally flawed set of documents. If one says one thing and gets everybody excited to go to war, and then once they're done, it says something else, that's bait and switch. I mean, that is not a sound foundation. So, really, they were the vested fathers, right? They were the ones that had an investment in a structure unfolding a certain way to their benefit. And it worked. Also, 200 years ago, 250 years ago, we were mostly farmers. We were mostly farming, or apprentices, and if we had an idea, we'd try it out, and if it didn't work out, we could go back to farming. It was the idea of the home being a unit of production, a place where everything got done inside the home, by the men, by the women, by the children. Everybody had a place, everybody knew what it was, they worked together, it was cooperative, it was a lot of work. But that home, after the Industrial Revolution, became a home of consumption. Remember, wage labor really wasn't a concept until after the Civil War. And now we can't imagine anything any other way, and this is what we're going to get to, is imagination. And who's imagining, even more importantly. Because the things we take for granted now and the things we think are necessary now in terms of jobs and economic growth and workforce development, I want everyone to examine the word workforce just for a minute and think about it. We can't seem to get out of this frame, and yet this frame is a relatively new one. This is all new stuff that we made up. So the Industrial Revolution really kicked what was a blueprint for the vested few into high gear. And that's when our education system was built. That's when so much of the bureaucracy happened. And I have a little theory about all of the bureaucracy, all the rules, all the regulations, all the legal structures, the language that we're inside of now really happened in the 1870s, 80s, 90s, the last half of the 19th century. And every metric from that point on is a hockey stick, right? Everything up. Everything just is exploding. Some good things, mostly not so great things. But we created this whole structure of assimilation and control and domination and extraction on hyperdrive once the Industrial Revolution kicked in. Now, my little theory is that pre-Civil War, we're all in our units of community and family, and we're connected, and we're depending on each other on a scale that is essentially in right relation to the world around it. Machines start doing the work of men, and men start to essentially, they don't know where they fit in. They don't know what their purpose is. Men had a purpose for a very long time. Machines started doing that work, and there was a loss in meaning, really. Hence, these structures, these bureaucracies, these ownership of the legal system, the medical system, all these various things that men started to make very complicated and very necessary because they themselves were questioning their own purpose and necessity. Now, as it comes online, you get world wars, you get productive capacity way beyond anything we need. You shift a consciousness away from buy these shoes because they'll last long and they're well made and they're good for your feet, to buy these shoes because your friends have them, you'll be happier, they'll make you feel better. You have a whole shift in consciousness around what production means and what it's for. You start to have the nuclear family, which is a total myth. You have home ownership, which is also not something that, and all of this, I find, is embedded right in the aspirational document, right in the Declaration of Independence. When it says the unalienable right is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it doesn't say life, liberty, and happiness. It says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can pursue and pursue and pursue as long as you want. It is built into our first sentence, what we are now victims of. And so as this happened, as we got into the mid-20th century, we started to see modern conveniences for the home. We started to see things that would make life easier, domestic life easier, right? And again, single-family homes, the move away from apartments where your cousins lived above you and your aunt lived down here, and people, you suddenly were all separated into boxes and living a domestic life. Domestication, essentially, when you're talking about the original root and form of it, is castration. That's what domestication is. When you domesticate an animal, you start through the process of castration and hereditary advancement in a certain way that creates domestication. So in a sense, my theory, I have no data to back this up, we've gone from, again, this household as a unit of production. Everybody knew their place, they were necessary, they had things to do, they had things to get done, they were tired at the end of the day. I'm not saying it was easy, I'm not saying it was romantic, but it made everybody feel a part of something. And that extended, certainly, beyond any sense of a nuclear family. It was way beyond that. It was a community. And now we've got little boxes, we've got people that are trying to pursue the American dream, which is a complete fabrication that propels the economy into a place that keeps all the structures in place. And here we are. Now, what was I going to say? So on the one hand, of course, again, in this room, we are the beneficiaries of that system. We are making decisions and trying to make the world a better place for people that aren't in the room, that are historically marginalized, and have no voice in the matter. But certainly can, it's certainly possible. All those are true, but we have to really break down the stories and beliefs that we are carrying in this room about what is actually real. None of this is real. This has all been created from our minds. The only thing real that I know of is when I walk outside and sit under a tree or sit at the creek or watch food come out of the ground. I know that's real. Everything else is essentially virtual reality that we've created. So, how do these intractable, seemingly, institutions collapse? How do we change this thing? Because we're not talking about reform, tinkering around the edges. Things are collapsing. We live in a very unstable world at the moment. And fear is a great motivator to keep things just where they are. And unfortunately, it's not just on the political side. Of course, the media loves it. Somebody said anger gets more clicks. You know, the media loves this stuff. So they're not going to help us out here at all. Fake, true, anything. So we have a very strange recirculating effect going on if you look out there. But if you look in here, and if you look in nature, and you look in the places that actually are real and matter, the answers really are already there. One of the favorite images that I hold most dear in all the work that we do at NoVo, and all the things I'm talking about here, is one that I learned when Hurricane Irene came through. When was that? 2011, 12? 11. We had just moved here. Jennifer and I had just moved here. And we were driving around the day or two after. You know, we didn't have power for a week. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing this incredible sight. And I, again, will tell you that everything we need to know, every lesson we need to learn is already out there, waiting to be heard. I've learned that once you trust the messages of nature, nature trusts you as a messenger. It's absolutely true. Once you start listening, you'll get a response. And so I'm driving around and I'm seeing an incredible sight. I'm seeing these trees, solid, you know, seemingly intractable trees, big ones that have fallen over, root ball and all. Everything's over. And I'm thinking, wow, how does that happen? Well, I learned with a hurricane that the watershed, the storm is so big and lasts for so long that the watershed is soaked. There's no place for the water to go. And so the ground gets soaked and the tree just lifts up and falls over. It's incredible, incredible. And I'm thinking, so you soak the ground and the trees fall over. That's a pretty good thing to carry with me. And so in thinking about our work, I think you know, at the foundation, I talk about the fact that we're practicing 21st century alchemy. We're attempting 21st century alchemy. We are attempting and working on turning money into love. And I think that's possible. I've seen it happen. And so we are essentially, and it's the tool we have, by the way. The money is what we happen to have as a tool. How can we use that tool most effectively to change the world that we're a part of? So it isn't exploitative. So it isn't based on domination and control and power, but it is actually bringing us back to our roots of meaningful community connection, where we care for each other, we look out for each other, we support each other, we give each other agency in whatever way that might mean. And so what may look like money going into a community is actually what we're trying to do is find the pathways that can turn into love, that can suddenly create a condition where people can lift themselves up out of some situation and look across and say, oh, there you are. I didn't notice you because I was so caught up in this pursuit. And so, and of course, in that ground, I just want to add that in that ground, because again, nature has it all, is the mycelium network, right? In that ground is where all the connections are made, all the communication happens, all of the nutrients and the information flows between all sorts of different pieces of biology, whatever happens to be growing there. And so, again, that's our tool. Money is our tool, but it's really in service to love. We have to remember that if we don't practice in every way possible a compassionate, caring, I don't know it all stance, and I never will, and there's other people that not only do, but they've carried it for generations, and they know the situations that are binding them to a structure that doesn't give them agency in their life. Those are the places we have to look, and the people we have to look to for the information on how to go to the next place. And is there a single answer? No. I mean, are there, this is a very complex problem because we've been so deeply programmed. Another little fact about programming, in 1345, 700 short years ago, in 1345, for the first time, minutes were turned into 60 seconds, and hours were turned into 60 minutes. I mean, now time, you borrow time, you waste time, you do time, time flies, you're like all these things, and yet our consciousness didn't even have that in itself. I've got this thing telling me what time it is. We live by time. We sell our time. Again, wage labor, time was created to cut up things into discernible abstract parts so we could sell them or buy them. And so that's just a reminder of literal programming, language and ideas that get into our consciousness, and then suddenly you get into a place where, oh, it's always been this way, it'll never change, it's not possible. That's happened all of human history. All of human history? It's like 15,000 years. We've been around for 200,000 at least. So we're not this. We're that. There's a fun analogy that those first 190,000 years or so, we were in the womb, right? We were in this perfect little right relation ecosystem with the rest of the species and the planet and everything. And then the last 15,000 have been this accelerating birth canal, essentially, where things have gotten faster and tighter and more constricted and more intense. And it's funny because the Big Bang makes us think that things went like that. But I don't know about you, but to me it feels like things are going like that. Like we're moving faster and more intensely and more abstractly, and just it feels almost out of control. But if you walked around the corner and saw some person, some animal, someone giving birth, you would not say, ah, life, what a beautiful process. There'd be screaming and blood and pain and just all this disruption and all this stuff. So it wouldn't actually look so promising. So that's the good news, is that maybe we are at the end of a birth canal. Now, this could take another 1,000 years. You know, this is not going to happen tomorrow necessarily, but it could. It could. But maybe that's where we are. Is that we are actually being born into something, and we have the opportunity, if we choose to accept it, to start breathing and take it in and not believe any of the stories that we are born into, which is the challenge. The huge challenge is to really get those stories out of our way. We're conduits, not containers. We're conduits, not containers. We are conduits of energy. We are life force personified in this moment in time. It is moving through us and giving us the words we say and the actions we do. The container part are the stories and beliefs and just stuff that we think is true because our parents told us, the school told us, the culture told us, all these things that we're carrying around like a big weight that is not us. And so ultimately the challenge is what's you and what's not you for each of us individually. What's you and what's not you. And that can be a lifelong quest depending on your upbringing and the ideologies you were brought into. But that is our challenge both personally and I think writ large, and why we're here is to say what does it mean to live a life that is both self-directed and completely dependent on the world I'm a part of. Completely dependent. I am not anything without all of the things around me. I'm literally, all I am is in relation to something else. It tells me who I am. So what was I going to say? Ultimately, because I do want to take some questions if we have some time, we're the ones in the room. Why are we here? Who isn't? What do we have to lose in ourselves that are traps for us and potentially prisons for others? Because it's every conversation I hear, and it's no fault of anyone. We're in this structure, but everything's about economic growth and job development and all this kind of stuff. And the economy we have created. If you asked somebody about the economy 100 years ago, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. This was not something people thought about. We have created this structure, this architecture that we're inside of that has got a hold, and I could go on and on, but one thing I will add, and then I want to read you something to finish. But there's this line I love, and it is the abstract without the particular allows the demonic. The abstract without the particular allows the demonic. Every abstraction, and that starts with language, by the way. That starts way back when you say, oh, look at that oak tree. It's not an oak tree. It's this complex living being that once we name an oak tree, then we can cut it down and we can build things with it and we can do this and do that. Well, that's true of people. That's true of everything. When people are a number on a page, an externality in the environment, it goes on. Every time we put abstraction on something by naming it, by quantifying it, we can do whatever we want to it. And that is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. You can't do that in community. You can't do that. The financial crisis of 2008 would not have happened if I saw my mortgage holder in the grocery store, if our kids went to school together, if we were at the movie theater together. Though it couldn't have, because there'd be a relationship. It would not be a transaction. So, I will leave you with something that Gandhi wrote. It was a note that he wrote near the end of his life. He didn't know it was going to be the end of his life, but he was trying to sum up some of the way he was thinking and feeling. And he wrote, "I will give you a talisman. Whenever you are in doubt, or when the self becomes too much with you, apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man or woman whom you may have seen, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to her. Will he gain anything by it? Will it restore her to a control over her own life and destiny? In other words, will it lead to freedom for the hungry and spiritually starving millions? Then you will find your doubts and yourself melt away." So again, we have to look to the people that aren't in the room and aren't even used to being asked and aren't really comfortable with speaking because they've never been asked. I mean, it's not just gathering people and saying, okay, we just gathered people. It's like, who are the people that are in that room? You know, inviting people to the table, you still built the table, and you still have the settings, and you have a certain number of them, and you're going to have to fill them. It's a challenge to really, really get underneath all this and hear from people that deserve and need and are necessary if we're going to honestly build a community that is there for everyone. So with that, I'll take some questions. Thank you. Thank you.